6. Euler. The police stormed Euler's 2-room apartment with military precision. Euler was instructed to sit on the couch while the carabinieri went through every corner of the apartment, bagged anything vaguely electronic-looking, and managed to find even the better hidden hardware. Nothing was left unsearched. They did a great job, Euler was forced to admit. Euler was brought to the police headquarters in Via Fatti Bene Fratelli. The building had been used by the police since World War II, but had been an institution in Milan long before that. For 400 years it had served as the city's most prestigious school for Milan's elite. The entire leadership of Milan's 5-day uprising against the Austrian occupation had been schooled here. Euler was confused. This was not the headquarters of the cybercrime division. This was where regular police work took place. This was also the headquarters of the anti-terrorism unit. Euler hoped they were not planning a terrorism charge. Euler was led to a windowless room smelling of mold and age. The pale yellow walls were flaking, and the dirt which had accumulated in the corners had a black rubbery quality about it. The room was furnished with a peeling formica table and 2 wooden chairs with metal frames. The 3 pieces of furniture looked like they could have belonged to a school a long time ago. Euler was left to wait. An agent stepped in with a glass of water. The agent, in full uniform, eyed Euler, trying to reconcile the image he had of hackers with the person sitting on the chair. "Is there anything you need?" he asked. The agent wouldn't know what charge they were planning. "Somebody will be with you soon." The agent left, and Euler heard the lock click shut. The door opened again sometime later, the glass of water long empty, and a man wearing a suit walked in. He surveyed the room, closed the door behind him, and sat on the empty chair across the table. He had the arrogant expression of people newly promoted to positions of power. The man placed a tablet on the table, lined it up to the worn-out edge, and stared at Euler. "Miss Valentina Borromeo," he said in perfect English. It was not meant to be a question. "An important surname in Milan, or so I am told." He paused, giving her time to respond. "I understand you speak fluent English," he continued when she did not reply. "Let's not make this any harder than it should." "I'm only a distant relative," she said. "None of the important has rubbed off on my side of the family." What is an American doing in an Italian police station? Euler asked herself, hearing his accent. Euler was suddenly aware she was not wearing her emergency jacket. The irony was not lost on her. She was not wearing the jacket she wore everywhere she went, and which her colleagues were identifying her with, the one time she might actually need it. Euler had once read an article on urban survival and had decided to sew razor blades, bobby pins, and handcuff keys into an old jacket she had picked up at a flea market. Her lifestyle wouldn't suggest she was at risk of being abducted, but paranoia worked like this, and paranoia had kept her away from places like this, up to now. "You have an impressive CV," said the man, swiping his finger over the tablet. "Let me see. You were born in Milan 30 years ago, are fluent in English, Mandarin, and Morothì. Graduated top of your class in economics from Bocconi University and now work as a risk assessment analyst at Ono." The man stopped talking and stared at her, expecting a reaction. Euler was generally uncomfortable around people, especially people she did not know. But the man's arrogant stare bothered her. And this was not a social event with strangers. This felt more like a game. A game, not too different from coding her way into a guarded system, a chess or a job interview. It was just a question of understanding the rules. Writing code, playing chess, and job interviews had precise rules, and Euler learned that she could reason herself to her objective if she understood these. She edged forward in her seat. She was eager and nervous in equal parts. "Your teachers had a high opinion of you," said the man, ignoring her silence. "It says that at the age of 8, you taught yourself binary and hexadecimal math. At 12, you claimed that the Chinese could have avoided the Opium Wars if they had understood that forcing the British to pay for tea using silver and causing a trade deficit was not a good long-term strategy. By 14, you had taught yourself Mandarin. That same year, you wrote a paper arguing that eidetic memory doesn't exist and that what we consider eidetic memory is instead the ability to reconstruct memories. Basically, the smarter you are, the less you need to remember because your brain rebuilds memories from core fragments instead of needing to actually access them. Did I understand your paper correctly? Euler went through what the man had just said, and her mind picked apart the implications behind his words. He had access to her personal data. Some of this was easy to find, but her knowledge of Chinese, and especially Morothì, was something she had never made public. She sat back, taking her time to explore the ramifications of her insights. There was a difference between hearing about the reach of the surveillance software used by the NSA and having all her information pulled up and sorted at a moment's notice. This man shouldn't have known of her existence until 6 hours ago, and yet here he was, tapping into a network which had cataloged, classified, and regurgitated lifetimes' worth of public records, emails, and browsing history with just a few clicks. Are you really as smart as your teachers say? If I were smart, I would not be here. He laughed. They say that dumb people have a high opinion of themselves because they think what they do is harder than it is. Smart people, on the other hand, underestimate how difficult what they do is because they can do it. Do you know how I tell smart people from the dumb ones? Smart people are the ones who can admit when they meet somebody smarter. The man looked down and swiped his finger across the tablet. You must have had a difficult time in school, he continued. Those clothes and that makeup cannot have made you the popular girl. Euler's lips pressed together and 1,000 voices started shouting their indignation and their anger. These voices were loud and hurt, and each wanted to make its pain heard. This is just a game, she told herself. Just a game. The voices kept screaming. Just a game, she repeated as the voices rose to a feverish pitch. Just a game, just a game, just a... And then all of a sudden, they stopped. As abruptly as they had started, they were gone. They had been pushed into a far corner, and her thoughts were quiet. All my high school classmates are either checking out canned soup in a supermarket or they are stocking the shelves of such supermarket. I could write software that makes them redundant overnight. I think we can safely say that high school is over. She looked up and smiled. You still haven't told me what I'm being accused of. His lips contracted until his mouth disappeared into a thin line. He took a moment to gather his thoughts before continuing. Very well, he said, putting down the tablet and leaning over. We have traced the activities of a certain binary to a CNC server and from there to your computer. This binary is located on the servers of the Morothì embassy in Berlin. Do you know the consequences of cybercrime in this country, Miss Borromeo? Once again, the implications of what the man was saying were more disturbing than his veiled threats. She was not sure if he realized what he had just admitted to. He could not have found anything on Icon's CNC server even if he had put a competent forensics team on it, and there was no way he could have followed the binary's tracks through the random set of hops Icon had coded. As incredible as it seemed, this left only one plausible explanation. Whatever government agency this man was working for, it was able to monitor all internet traffic. It knew every keystroke and every mouse click transmitted over the internet. This included every password, every credit card number, every email, every picture, and every video. Everything, somewhere, in some data center, was stored everybody's digital footprint, and it could be pulled up with just a few clicks. Worse, this meant that SSL had been cracked too. The internet's default security had been cracked. It had to. This was the only way the binary could have been traced back to her. The news of this would be received with an uproar were the media to believe this was even possible. The man let his threat linger a few seconds before continuing. I want you to hand over the credentials of the CNC server, the binary source code, all the data you have downloaded, and the identity of any person who has knowledge of this. The man only had part of her attention. She was still following the ramifications of his words, and something didn't add up. I'm not sure why you're asking me this. You claim to know what I've done, and you have my hardware. Surely you must be able to get what you want without the need for my help. I don't think you appreciate the position you're in, Miss Borromeo, said the man, putting his elbows on the table and leaning forward. Look around. Do you know how easy it was to get you in here? Examining the data the man had given her, Euler was finding huge logical gaps in the information he was portraying as facts. "Let's stop for a second and consider the facts," said Euler. "If you had a case against me, I would not be here. If you could decrypt my traffic or my drives, and I had done what you claim, I would not be here. I would be in a cell awaiting for my trial. But you can't, and that is why we're here, aren't we?" The man's nostrils flared for a second. "Don't mistake my politeness for weakness. I won't be patient for long," he said after a long pause. "Let's assume that you are right and that I do have what you want," said Euler. "You can't exactly take me to court without revealing to the whole world that you are monitoring everybody's communications and have rendered SSL encryption meaningless." The man stood suddenly up and his chair crashed to the floor with a loud bang. He stood speechless with both hands flat on the table until he realized just how revealing his reaction had been. He picked up the chair and sat down again. "Who's telling you we don't have other options? Do you?" The man lined up the tablet with the edge of the table and collected his thoughts for a long time. "Let me make this clear. If I had what you're asking for, and I'm not saying that I do, I would make the information public rather than hand it over to you." The man pursed his lips, stood up, and walked to the door. "I wish you good luck, Miss Borromeo," he said, closing the door behind him. Euler was surprised at how quickly he had given up. Or was this part of his strategy? She looked at the situation, trying to determine if this was a good cop, bad cop routine. She asked herself if she would be followed once she left, or if they had bugged her apartment in her absence. She went through possible scenarios for what felt like hours until she was forced to admit she did not have enough data to reason any further. She put her arms on the table and rested her head on them. Her arms were numb when she opened her eyes again. She stood up and massaged them, trying to get the blood circulating. She wondered how long she'd been sleeping. There was no clock on the wall, and they had taken her phone. A spider dropped off the table on a silk line and scurried off. Euler moved involuntarily away from it. She noticed a camera in the corner. Was the wait part of the interrogation? She sat back down, put her feet on the table, and gave her best impression of not being intimidated. She was asking herself how long it would be before the second round of questioning started, when an agent came in informing her that she was free to go. "Can I have my stuff back?" asked Euler, following him out. "It's part of the investigation," said the agent. "We'll return it once this is closed. Here's a receipt for everything that was seized." She looked at the clock hanging on the wall behind the agent and realized she had been locked in the room for 16 hours. "Sign here," said the agent. The night was warm and pleasant when she left the police station. She had gone through an experience which most people would have considered unsettling and had lost her belongings to a foreign government agency powerful enough to have her arrested without presenting any evidence. Yet she felt calm and focused. She was not sure she understood her own feelings. She went home and cleaned up the mess left by the police. They had taken everything. She checked. She went to work the following day claiming to have been ill. Nobody was surprised she had not called in, and nobody was worried that her absence would impact her deadlines. After work, she met with her sister for an aperitivo, the Milanese habit of having a buffet dinner for the price of a cocktail. Elena slipped Euler a hard drive which Euler had left with her for this type of emergency. Paranoia made you effective. Euler had no idea if she was under surveillance, but she was not taking any more chances. Paranoid was how she had always behaved, and paranoia had always served her well. Her secret was being methodical and attentive to details. There was a routine for everything she did, whether this was studying, hacking into an embassy, or making sure she was not arrested again. She had decided to cut corners and had not followed her own rules. It would not happen again. Euler was thinking about the file she had downloaded when it occurred to her that the man was likely interested in her team's encryption, seeing that he hadn't been able to get past it both online and on her hard drive. He probably thought they had got lucky with the hack. A zero-day exploit, probably. He had no idea that her team had cracked the Morothì encryption code. If he had known, the interrogation would have probably been very different. It would take her a couple of days to rebuild her stack and get back online, but there were questions burning in her mind and she did not want to wait that long to answer. Experts were divided as to how eidetic memory worked. She had tried explaining this to her teachers. It was really quite simple. Euler sat in her chair, closed her eyes, and started going over the emails she had read before the Carabinieri kicked down her door. One by one, in her head, she read through each of the emails she had only briefly seen. Euler would not go back online until her stack was bulletproof. When she did, the first person she would look for was the pilot of the Valkyrie, Hans Staffel.